All right. Welcome, Jim, to the Sassacre podcast. This is so exciting for me.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Absolutely.
Yes. So, where to start? Because there are so many places that we could go.
hmm
Um, I think actually what I want to do is go to some of the questions that I received from my community because some people know about you and some
hmm
people don't know about you.
Okay.
And I want to help those who don't know you to understand you more and at the same time answer the questions of the people who do know you.
Okay.
So let's start off a little bit with just what is it that you like best? One of the questions was, what is it that you like best about your work? And as you answer that, you can tell people a little bit about what you do for those who don't know you.
Really? You got that question from
Yes.
somebody?
Yes.
Wow. That's really interesting for this
Mhm.
type of venue to get a question like that.
Yeah.
What I like best is hearing when people say that I've completely helped them transform their life.
Mm-hmm.
The number one thing that I like hearing is when people say, "You're right. I am not the same person now that I was 13 weeks ago."
Mm-hmm.
Because when I start coaching the program, I tell people you will not finish the same person. And I'm sure a lot of people probably think, oh, yeah, I've heard that. He says that, etc. But when I hear people start saying, oh my gosh, week number 1 and 2 and 3, I didn't recognize I could change this quick. And the number one, what I like best is when people say, literally, the number one thing I like best is when people say, I didn't realize I would be this different a few months later in my life. That's what I like best.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It's also, I'll probably have talked about this a little bit in the introduction as well, but I started the TCP program in October last year, so it's 10 months
hmm
ago, and the changes that I've seen in myself, but also the changes that I've seen in other people is amazing. So
Yeah.
let's let's think about with the listeners that we have, many
hmm
people are often feeling that they're in a rut.
Yeah.
Um, they are very often frustrated with their work,
hmm
or they feel that they're not good enough.
hmm
What kind of things have you seen in relation to that that could be helpful for them?
Well, you're asking three different questions.
Mm-hmm.
Being in the rut is not the same thing as not satisfied with your work.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then this is also because you've got different audiences. This could be cultural as well. The Japanese view work, and I lived in Japan years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the Japanese view work much differently than Americans do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in Japan, there's a sense of duty and a sense of honor and obligation and respect. And in the United States, we don't live by most people don't work by those same principles in corporate America or corporations.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take this apart. So what or where do you want to talk about this? Because being stuck is one thing, but not enjoying your job is a second thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean that is you can not enjoy your job, but feel like you're not stuck because you could go anywhere if you wanted to, but you just like the security, of this job. So
Mm-hmm.
let's break that down a little more.
Okay. So what I often hear
Yep,
is
here we go.
what I
Sorry for
often
yeah.
yeah. What I often hear is that people are um, they feel like they want to do more, but
hmm
they are stuck with the situation, their circumstances,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they are very busy in their work. We have a lot of listeners who have family, they have family responsibilities, and so they are thinking of, I have to be responsible for my work, I have to be responsible for my family, and I still want to grow and develop myself, but I don't
Yeah.
have time for that.
Yeah. They're working completely backwards
Mm,
by thinking that way. Is they're working from the outside in instead of the inside out.
mm-hmm,
Is anything and everything that we have in life is a reflection of who we are, which is our identity.
mm-hmm,
And they're working from, okay, let me spend my entire life in my environment and I'm not going to work on myself. Well, you were the self that created that environment. And until
mm,
you upgrade yourself, the environment will not upgrade. It's so, so simple, I mean, most people miss this, but it's so simple is to change my life. I have to change me. But
Mm-hmm.
most people try to change their life without changing themselves, and it never, ever, ever works because we don't work that way as beings.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say, because you've heard me say before that when we say, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough energy, and I don't have enough money,
Mm-hmm.
by circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And work by circumstance, you repeat your circumstances.
You're right.
So for someone to work from that position,
Mm-hmm.
the reality, whether they want to accept it or not, because people get into self-deception, the
Mm-hmm.
reality is if you work by, I don't have enough time, you will never have enough time. If
Mm.
you work by, I don't have time to make more money, or I don't have time to change myself or work on myself, then
Mm-hmm.
things will never change. So then people like get into this fooling themselves thinking, oh, something will just miraculously change.
Mm.
And it never does. And they're living in the illusion of self-deception.
Okay, so what can people?
They're living in an illusion and self-deception. There we go.
Okay,
Okay. Yep.
so what? So the Sassika podcast listeners really like steps.
Okay.
Steps. So if they're in that situation that they want to change, they want to stop living by circumstance.
Yeah.
How do they do that?
Well, first it comes down to choice. How do
Mm-hmm.
you choose? Everything is choice. Life is choice.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, right now you could hop on this podcast if you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
You could go have dinner if you wanted. You could go shopping if you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
You're making the choice right now to be here with me, all right, and
Mm-hmm.
your listeners. And everyone listening, they can make a choice right now to go hop in the car, to turn this off, to turn it on, to listen to it 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
They can make choices.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing we have to do is make the choice that I'm not going to live in the old way. I'm going to live in a new way. And
Mm-hmm.
then from there, because you're asking really broad questions, we need to bring them down simpler for people.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would look at is what is it that you want to change in life?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go there. So what kind of things are they wanting? Are they, which you didn't mention, are they wanting to change their jobs? Because you know your audience really well. So
Yeah.
what is it they are wanting?
Yeah. So I would say we have different groups. We
Hmm.
do have, so increasingly in my community, I'm seeing people who want to change their jobs and who are changing their jobs. And this is great
Okay.
because they're making that shift. But then there's still other people who are not, and, you know, they're sticking with those circumstances. So there's the change jobs people. And then
Yeah.
there's also the, I want to make a contribution in my current work, but
Hmm.
I am scared to step up and do that sort of people. So
Okay.
there's maybe two groups.
Well, people that are afraid to actually leave a job are working from fear.
Mm-hmm.
They're working from the illusion of security, which you said earlier, that you said that people want to do different things, but they have families and kids and everything, and they don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
When people work from that place, they're working from fear, and they're trapped. And they're also trapped, which is, it is an illusion. They are trapped in the illusion of security.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that probably, I know that it exists very much all over the world and in the US, because, you know, I work with people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Help me out here so I can help your audience even more for those in Japan.
Mm.
What is the cultural belief about a job and loyalty to it?
That there is a lot of loyalty to a job. That is the traditional way that things have been. It's changing somewhat.
Okay.
So more people are like, you know, the really talented people,
Hmm.
brave, courageous people are taking that step and
Hmm.
going out and doing their own thing, you know, going the entrepreneurial route, especially. But
Hmm.
there's still, what I see among my clients and community is still a lot of feeling that, so there's a concept called gaman. Gaman is putting up with the situation,
Okay.
right? And that is very, very strong.
That's victim mentality also.
Yes, yes.
Now let me add here. So this podcast is a little different for those in Japan. That's a whole different ball of wax. In that, for example, when I work with people from India,
Mm-hmm.
and we have some people in my coaching, they have they can have, not everyone, but they can have very rigid beliefs about relationships
Mm-hmm.
and caste systems and who can marry and who can't, and arranged marriages and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And then many times I see people that they're unhappy in their marriages, in that culture. Why? Because they were matched up by somebody else. But
Mm-hmm.
here's the bigger leap that person has to make. They have to leap beyond the cultural identity of being Indian because they're human beings first. And if
Mm,
they subscribe to, well, I'm Indian and this is what we do, then they
mm,
will never do anything different in a relationship or marriage because by them, a bigger social frame is Indian.
mm,
Now, let's go over a couple of oceans here over to Japan.
mhm,
If a person works from, I must be loyal to the company first, but
mm.
then I'm going to, what did you, gammon? Is that what you called
Yeah,
it?
man,
Or,
that's right.
yeah. So I'm going to actually put up with this. Number one, I am being a victim because anytime and people don't like that word, but when we put up with anything and
Mm-hmm.
we're just saying, well, this is the way that it is, we
Yeah.
have no power, and that is victim mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So in that culture also, what would have to happen, and it's so funny because when I lived there in the 80s, girls were just starting to drive, teenage girls,
Mm,
and it was really interesting for me to watch how this culture had been so male dominated for all these years, but
mm-hmm.
yet women were starting to exercise more independence around that time as well. And
Mm-hmm.
they had American influences of music and everything else.
Mm,
But I look at how things change. And what I would tell people is this, is you can be loyal to the company
mm-hmm.
or you can be loyal to the quality of life that you want. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're stuck in gammon, then you're not both
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to actually subjugate your life to an external entity, which
Mm-hmm.
is a company, and they do that because of the cultural beliefs about people doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Then what's going to happen is a lot of people are probably going to actually criticize those people that want to get outside of that system
Yeah.
because why? That's not what we do. What we do is we're loyal to the company. But you
Mm-hmm.
know what? I'm going to just say it like this. A lot of these people literally waste their lives giving their lives away to something that's unfulfilling to them.
Yeah.
And they're just enduring their life. So the first place they have to start is, you know what? I'm not going to live that way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an artist or a painter or a public speaker, whatever. I'm going to do what fulfills my heart and my soul. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a leap. Here in the States, we just do it. And your parents might say, well, do it, don't do it. But in
Mm,
Japan or India or places like that, you have other social pressures that are like, what are you doing? You should not be doing that. So they will get some backlash.
mm-hmm.
But I would tell people to live their life.
Right. So, what about when they do get that backlash? Because I think that's what comes up in people's minds and makes that, there's the fear of actually taking the leap. There's the fear of what do other people think of me?
Yeah. Well, let's go there for a second. Is the way that I look at it is this is a crude metaphor, but a third like it's a simple metaphor, not crude. But for example, if you are in 10th grade in the United States, the grade system, if you're in 10th grade,
Mm-hmm.
would you let a first grader tell you what to do?
Mm,
So if you're on this path and you're actually exercising your own autonomy,
mm-hmm.
why, and you're a 10th grader metaphorically, why would you let the first graders tell you what to do and take all of your power from you?
Mm-hmm.
But what will happen is the first graders will be really loud and they're going to be chatter, 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 chatter first graders.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason there's a first grader. Are
Right.
they are, and then the way that I look at it is this is you said it. So gamon, the word, is that the correct pronunciation?
Come on.
Gamon. Okay.
Come on.
Gamma.
Mm-hmm.
Gamon. Okay. So if I were in that culture and I'm like, why would I let people who put up with their lives tell me how to live my life?
Mm,
Right? These
mm-hmm.
people are all putting up with their lives, which also means they're unhappy.
Yeah.
Why would I let these unhappy people actually enforce themselves on me or force themselves on me and
Mm-hmm.
actually insist that I live an unhappy life as well?
Mm, mm-hmm.
Right. So that's a big step. I mean, we're talking about a lot of stuff here. That's a big step for a lot of cultures because people are worried about, well, what will my parents say? Well,
Mm-hmm.
guess what? Your parents are unhappy. So what does it matter what they say? But I understand also that we have to be, especially in Japan and India, we
Mm-hmm.
have to be respectful to our elders and to our parents.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I look at it. Am I going to be respectful to the beliefs of people who keep my life trapped? Or am I going to be respectful to my own autonomy and my own soul and my own spirit
Mm-hmm.
and live the life of happiness that I want? Because I can't have both a lot of times. And this is what I also know. The parents, they'll get over it. At some
Mhm.
point, they will get over it.
Mm.
Because really what every parent wants anywhere in the world is they want their kid to be happy. That's the number one thing
Mm.
parents want is I want my kid to be happy.
Right.
So now when I look at that, the leap for especially the Japanese is to recognize that the system that they are in particular in that country, that culture, can trap people and can trap them for a lifetime. And
Yeah.
I love Japan when I was there. I'm not criticizing the people, but I'm looking at that belief system. And to me, it's not healthy that people actually just live their entire life doing a job that they're putting up with.
Mhm. Mhm.
Makes
Yeah,
sense? Yeah.
that totally makes sense. And it also brings to mind another concept that I often talk
Mhm.
about, which is mottainai. So, mottainai means it's a waste or it's a shame. And that's exactly what I'm hearing from you, that if
Mhm.
people are doing the gaman, they're putting up with the situation, then it's mottainai, it's a waste or it's a shame because they're not able to contribute in or grow in a way that they could do.
Yeah, and let me add there. So my acupuncturist, which is Chinese, he said if acupuncture, which it works for me, but he said if it doesn't work, people shouldn't come back. And he
Mm-hmm.
goes, if they come 2 times and it doesn't work, then they should not come back because they're wasting their life. It's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what he said. And I said, what do you mean wasting their life? And he says, well, if they already know it's not working, then why would they waste that time in their day, which is part of their life, to come
Mm-hmm.
here? They're wasting that time, which is wasting their life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe another way to put this is when people actually just live in that rut, which that's the word, excuse me, you used earlier is the word rut.
Mm-hmm.
They're wasting their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
then the
that's,
question is for what?
yeah.
For what? Money?
Mm,
For security?
mm,
Security doesn't exist. I
mhm.
mean, you know as well as I do that when you go to Tokyo, I mean that town is crowded, and especially on the subway, right? I mean that is one crowded city.
It is.
And I'm going to tell your listeners a real quick story, then come back. I remember one time we were on the subway and we were in high school, and this boy, had like an Elvis Presley little flip in his hair.
Mhm.
The train was so crowded that he was leaning forward when the door shut, and the door shut on his hair, and he had to ride entirely to the next station with his hair caught in the door. So that was funny. But that was funny. So I wish I could give you guys a visual of that, but all these people working all these jobs and
Mhm,
working their entire life for money, and then they
mhm,
want security. And
mm.
then look at the amount of people that literally they work for years for the money and then they drop dead of a heart attack.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, I mean, that's a whole big topic. I don't think we're going to go into that one in the
Yeah.
on the Sasuke podcast, but the whole karoshi, like, the dying, the death from overwork, that is a big topic. But let's move on to something a
Okay.
little bit cheerier. I mean, we can leave that just as a seed for people to think about because it's really, really serious.
That's a big seed. And then there were moving topics, and that's great. But
Yeah.
Oprah Winfrey says, and I'm sure people in Japan know know who Oprah Winfrey is, right? I guess.
Um, so she's definitely not as known here as in the States and other parts of the world, but yeah,
Uh,
she's a very, very famous talk show host, right? And she's done
one of the most
amazing things.
one of the most recognized faces in the world. We do
Yeah,
know that.
yeah.
And Oprah says, let me go 2 places here. Oprah says, use your life.
Mm-hmm.
Use your life.
Yeah.
And many years ago, I used to actually work for President Carter, and he's somebody who uses his life.
Mm-hmm.
People don't recognize that after he left the White House, his humanitarian work, even now he's 94 years old and just survived brain cancer, etc. The man is constantly doing things to improve the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm telling everyone listening before we move on, use your life wisely to
Mm-hmm.
contribute to the greater good, which will bring more wealth and abundance back to you. Okay, let's move on.
All right. So the next one was the second group of people that I was talking about. So we have the
Mhm.
ones who are unhappy, want to move out. There's the ones who are in a position and they have a lot of potential, but they think they're not good enough. They think, oh, my English isn't good enough, or everyone else is better than me, and so that's kind of stopping them from kind of demonstrating their full potential in their role.
So, being a little funny here, but if I hear that phrase one more time that I'm not good enough, I'm going to scream and explode. Oh my gosh. I am so sick of human beings saying, I'm not good enough. What if people judge me?
Now, can I
Oh
just,
my,
this is really interesting. And I
it's
think
normal.
for the Sasuke podcast
Yeah.
listeners, because a lot of my Japanese client community, they think it's just Japan.
No, it's global, all over the world. And literally, if I'm not saying literally, if I had $1 for every time somebody said I'm not good enough or people are going to judge me, I would have millions of dollars of cash at $1 at a time in the bank. And I hear it so much, I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for the question. I'm waiting for, here it comes. And when we look at that, that is such an illusion as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that I see there was, and I'm not making fun of him. This is real. Back in the 80s in the United States, back when we had only commercial TV, we had only 3 TV channels in the United States. Probably like a lot of countries, you only have a few broadcasting companies.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy who did an infomercial, and you can find him online. Anyone can look him up. His name is Tommy Vu, V-U.
Mm-hmm.
And he did infomercials on how to buy real estate and be rich.
Mm-hmm.
That was a whole tone. He's Vietnamese, and his accent is completely Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's literally as if he just stepped out of Vietnam and had very few English lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find interesting is that he didn't he didn't say, you know what, my English and my diction and my grammar is not great. He didn't say any of that. He just got on infomercials and made millions of dollars.
Wow.
And so I look at people saying, well, my English is not good enough. Relative and compared to what?
Mm-hmm.
And then I see I've mentioned before, well, maybe you know and don't know, one of my good friends, his name is Akio Matsumura, which is Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
He is a global diplomat. He is friends with the Dalai Lama. He was an advisor to Mother Teresa. He's friends now with the Prime Minister of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
The man is he's one of the most vocal voices right now in the world about some nuclear stuff that's happened in Japan. He's a very, very big global personality.
Mm-hmm.
And his English is only okay. But you know what? I didn't go, it was years ago, I didn't know him, but he's hosted global events. Like he was the first person to convince Mikhail Gorbachev to allow a spiritual leader in the Kremlin in 75 years back in the 90s when the Dalai Lama went inside the Kremlin. And the only reason I say this is I have been with him before in extremely, extremely high level meetings. I mean, he's advised kings, presidents, prime ministers. He was the first person to introduce Yasser Arafat and Rabin in Jericho back in the 90s. But the reason I tell you this, the man has made a global impact behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
He used to know Mr. Sasakawa, which at one point was the richest man in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is this, his Japanese, and especially in writing, is very, very broken.
Mm-hmm.
But he makes a global impact because he doesn't worry about how good is my Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
What are people going to say if I say something and I say the wrong word?
Mm-hmm.
He just goes out, and his whole concern is, what can I do to improve the planet for the future generation?
Right.
So many people get into, oh my gosh, my English is not perfect, and I'm listening to it, and I'm thinking, you speak better English than people from Kentucky, or some southern state. I can understand you better than somebody from Alabama, which you guys listening, in Europe and Japan, I'm only kidding, but we make fun a lot of times of people from the deep South because, well, it's a different socioeconomic, and they have sometimes really strong accents, Southern accents.
Mm-hmm.
But these are illusions, because then I tell people, and you've heard me say, well, when are you going to be good enough? When? So if my English isn't good enough, when? When everyone on the planet says, oh, your English is amazing?
Yeah.
There's no criteria to know when we're going to be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So what I tell people, and this is what Dr. Martin Luther King said, it doesn't matter what you say, just say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at, what if somebody could help me in a huge way in my life, and they spoke like not excellent English, which that wasn't even excellent English the way I said it, grammar. But what if they could really actually help the world, but they didn't because they were afraid of the way people were going to perceive their English or their Japanese or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And what a loss to the world.